record is that people can also watch the webinar afterwards, since everyone is not able to be here at this point in time. So that's the reason why I record. And we start recording, Asa?
Yeah, the recording is up and running.
Perfect. So yeah, again, welcome to this webinar on Smart Specialization Strategies. As I already said, my name is Dag Håkon Hanberg from Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I work as an associate professor in entrepreneurship, and I'm co-hosting this webinar together with Elisa Citanti and Asa Mallon from Trondheim Techport. And today we have three speakers with us here. We have Tatiana Serra. She is head of economic promotion and the part of the government of Catalonia's Ministry of Economy and Finance. Then we also have Slavo Radosevic. He's professor of industry and innovation studies at University College London. And we also have Rune Dahl Fitjar. He's professor of innovation studies at the University of Stavanger. So we'll start with Tatiana today. You can prepare yourself when you're ready. And also introduce that you are also leading the development of Catalonia's Smart Specialization Strategy, which is aimed to accelerate the green transition and integrate transformative innovation policy principles. We'll look forward to your presentation, and here it's up and running. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dag. Good morning and good afternoon already. It's a pleasure to be here and to share this space with Slavo Radosevic and Rune Dahl Fitjar to talk about S3 and cross-regional collaboration. I'm a practitioner, having worked with S3 for more than 10 years now, always in Catalonia, but always trying to connect the local with the global, engaging in European projects and collaborating with international institutions and networks in research and policy. Having said that, how do I see a smart specialization strategy? For me, smart specialization strategy are an opportunity to rethink, to reinvent, to experiment, to develop the regional innovation systems that the huge challenges our society is facing require. So we are addressing very complex with environmental, social, economic problems. We are in a highly uncertain, volatile context. Problems have local and global dimensions, and they can only be addressed with systemic approaches. And business as usual in public administrations, in research, in companies cannot provide answers to these challenges. So complex challenges do not have easy solutions. They require coordinated multi-level interventions by multiple actors, and they need to be guided by directional goals. And they need to be directed to the transformation of our current socio-technical systems. In this context, smart specialization strategies should, in my view, provide answers about what kind of infrastructures, what kind of capacities, what kind of skills, interactions, networks, what kind of community of practices or forms of governance or forms of financing do we need in order to accelerate green and just transitions. And we know that are many different pathways. There are many different ways to address this challenge. And they need to be explored, and we need a lot of experimentation. So this picture reflects our approach to smart specialization strategy in Catalonia. What is important is that smart specialization strategies cannot be improvised. They need to relate to a strong conceptual framework. And it's key that they have a theory of change so that we can contrast our hypotheses. No? Smart specialization, now in our case, is built on the multi-level perspective framework. In this framework, the driver of transformation of socio-technical systems is the interaction between landscapes, the global trends, between the regime, the business as usual, as we understand it, and the niches, those spaces where actors are generating alternatives and new practices. And in our smart specialization strategies, we need to understand how global trends like climate change or aging society or geopolitical tensions, how they put a lot of pressures in current business as usual, and it's difficult for this current business as usual to respond. They are very resistant to change, and it's why we need to generate alliances and interactions between the niches, the regimes, and the landscape. We need to understand how this works, and understanding this context, we need to develop new responses and new tools. This is our S3 in a snapshot. It recognizes that to accelerate today's green and just transitions, we need radical changes in our socio-technical systems. And then the focus of the smart specialization strategy is on how to accelerate these systemic transformations that we desire. A fair, equitable, and healthy food system, also in relation with a health system, a sustainable mobility system, how needs to change the education, the universities, the knowledge generation system, also the role the culture plays in that, industry. And technologies are very important, are key, but they are an instrument to address this transformation that require a lot of social innovation too. And these are the kind of directional goals we established in our strategy. We want to move towards the SDGs, but now we are in this situation on the left side of the screen. And how we discover, because smart specialization strategies are about discovery processes, and we understand that these processes are about engaging different actors in developing, but also adopting new practices that allow us to move forward towards this desired direction. This is another example. We have different kind of illustrations with directional goals. And how do we work on that? We work with what we call shared agendas. This is our main instrument. And this is like the structure or the tool or the methodology that we use in order to generate this multi-actor discovery process to generate and to adopt alternatives. So shared agendas are about multi-actor coalitions of the willing, we say, coalitions of the willing, coalitions of those actors that really are engaged and want to develop alternatives to move in this direction. So they are not about consensus. They're about generating coalitions of actors generating alternatives, but not only technological, also social, and how to adopt and to generate knowledge and demonstrators about how it's possible to adopt these different practices, these alternative practices that are more sustainable and more just, and how it's possible, how other options are possible for the current business as usual. So what we are seeing, and it's important in all these kind of challenges, is that we start always with a place-based problem, with a group of stakeholders that really want to address this challenge, that they recognize that even if lots of institutions and actors are already doing many things to address this challenge, they are not working, they are not moving forward, they are locked in. And when we have this situation, it's one way, when we start working with them, building the shared understanding of the obstacles and the opportunities to work differently, to understand differently the problem, and to generate new opportunities. And I'm going to provide an example because if not, it's very complex to explain. Okay. We started working in the formal smart specialization strategy with 2 pilot projects developing these shared agendas. The first one is the rural shared agenda of Terras de Lleida, Pirineu y Aran. And it was starting very simple. It was a group of 8 small municipalities which had the problem of managing the manure. They needed a solution, a fast solution to this huge problem. and how it became that working with them, they start seeing that bioeconomy was opportunity for them, and maybe they shouldn't work to this problem as a problem, but as an opportunity to build, to create new opportunities, new economic opportunities in this territory based on the invasion of resources. How they create new value chains, new forms of logistics, and in this process, how is that 150 families of farmers come together, buy a piece of land, 17 hectares of land, and start valorizing the manure, but also generating new forms of energy and generating the first area of biopolygons in Catalonia. And how this initiative started in 8 very small municipalities, has become the main strategy for the whole province of Lleida, and has now become the central element of Catalonia bioeconomy strategy, and how this initiative is also now engaged in area. And this example of Lleida, this methodology we are using, is being replicated in other European regions. And we have the other project also, this is with aging society, and it's about how, if we understand really the social problems but related with aging, but taking into account the perspective of the multiple stakeholders, the caregivers, the public administration, the hospitals, the social workers, the families, if we are able to understand the complexity of the problem and we are able to provide solutions, these solutions have a market at the local level and can improve the quality of life of people, but they also have a market beyond the borders. And this is another kind of agenda that is mobilizing lots of actors, lots of resources, and attracting also many funds from European projects, because at the end, shared agendas and smart specialization strategy should be about working on place-based challenges at local level, but also looking and understanding that these challenges are shared by many European countries, and therefore it's the responsibility to connect with other regions and to participate in this exchange of knowledge and integrating new capacities from other territories in order to develop further these solutions. And for working with that, this doesn't come out spontaneously. In the government, with the S3, we have created a group of 30 policymakers. We are working as a team together in 8 different departments, and we are really trying and engaging with researchers, with international organizations, with experts, to develop the tools that are required to work with this kind of systemic approaches. This is like systems mapping, but also all the tools elaborated by Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium, also the methodologies of the OECD with net zero, but also like with applying lots of technology to generate new data and working differently with this new data, and doing lots of workshops, but not workshops just to share, workshops to build these coalitions of the willing to work together in a clear direction. And okay, at the end, S3 should contribute to develop the regional ecosystems we need for transformative innovation. We need different kinds of ecosystems to address the complex social and environmental challenges that our regions have. Our innovation systems are focused on increasing the competitiveness of companies, on the technology, of the transfer of technology, and of course this is very important, but it's not sufficient. When we want to address social and environmental challenges, we need different kinds of interaction, we need different kinds of infrastructures, we need different kinds of governance. And this is what we are trying to create through smart specialization strategy. We need new structures for this transformative innovation, and these shared agendas are kind of these kind of structures, but also we need this new kind of policymakers in public administration, breaking down silos, working together, putting the effort on the challenge, not in the competences. And also we need new skills in universities, new kind of structures that allow university research centers, technological centers that have people specialized in understanding the systemic challenges and how to work differently with the people in the territory. Of course, skills, capacities are key. And also it's important to mobilize all these researchers that usually are working with another perspective, but their knowledge is so relevant to address these challenges, how we can find ways to incentivize them to work in this direction. and about international and interregional collaboration, because this is an important thing to be discussed in this webinar. So we see that shared agendas are a platform for synergies, and we have some documents explaining that if at the local level, the stakeholders really engage in this transformative process with systemic approaches, since mobilizing and defining new ways of collaborating, defining new kinds of indicators, defining demonstrators, they are very attractive for researchers that want to engage with them and bring them into European projects. And we are seeing this is happening. And for us, it's very important to build this value change from the local to the global. And it is key that smart specialization strategies are more connected to European projects. We have this kind of platforms that show us how the different actors in Catalonia are collaborating in different contexts, with different networks. We have here all the projects from Horizon, from the Smart Specialization Strategy, and we're developing new kinds of tools that allow us to understand who has the knowledge, how is this knowledge used, how are the interactions of stakeholders. And also very important for us is the interregional cooperation projects, especially in the Mediterranean. And we are very active, and we are connecting our smart specialization with the Interreg Euromed program. We are responsible for co-leading with Region Emilia-Romagna the governance project for this program. And our role is about developing and providing methodologies and capacities to really engage smart specialization strategies with interregional projects in order that together they join efforts to address the huge challenge that we have in the Mediterranean. And I think this would be all. Here you have you can cancel all the documents, and there's a lot of information in our webpage, but also in the presentation that it will be shared. There are some links that you can consult the different materials or documents that we have published. Thank you.
And thank you, Tatiana. And to all of you in the audience here, please note down your questions to Tatiana on a sheet of paper or on your computer, or whatever you feel useful, because in the end of the webinar we're going to have a common Q&A with all the speakers. But before that, we have our next speaker up, and that is Slavo Radosevic. He's a professor of industry and innovation studies at University College London, and he's interested in science, technology, and innovation policy, and particularly focused on Central and Eastern Europe, and published extensively in international journals in these areas, and have also recently authored quite a few papers on EU smart specialization strategies, experimentation and accountability trade-offs in innovation, and dynamic policy issues. So looking forward to this presentation, and the stage is yours, Slav.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I first want to thank to Era Fabric for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be part of your network for at least these few hours. And my special thanks goes to colleagues from the University of Split, because originally I come from Croatia, and I work and continue to work on Croatia. So really my special greetings to colleagues from there. What I will present today is actually based on 3 papers, which are all 3 available. Third one is kind of in the process of being turned into academic publication, which is always, as many of you know, a very painful process. But the main point is this, which all 3 papers share, is this trade-off which we see between the very fashionable approach in policy today, not fashionable but very relevant, to experimentation, given the uncertainties, some of which Tatiana very nicely highlighted, and the fact that all this policy implementation takes place in the context of public policy, and there is a bureaucracy and there are rules of accountability. And so we see that there is a trade-off there, And the point is that when we look at more broadly about these issues, then we can see that there are two ways how people think about the policy making. One is and this is usually academics who think that there is some kind of enlightened policymakers which knows what has to be done, and they are those who are feeding that policymaker. Well, in reality, if you actually look at how the policies are designed, they are much more, you can call it muddling through processes. They are highly political. They are a result of interactions between different players, and that is even more visible today in the context of transformative innovation policy, where the process of policy formulation itself is a kind of uncertain a process with lots of policy knowledge gaps in that process. So we see here a huge gap between rhetorics, everybody is for that, and the reality. And the quote from by Kevin Morgan nicely reflects that. He says that there is a disconnect between rhetoric, which calls for more experimental public sector, and the reality of public sector compliance culture that is intolerant to mistakes and failures. Yeah, so that is our rationale and starting point. We have accountability, which is kind of has to fit with this idea how to reconcile it with the experimentation. And what are the governance solutions? How can you practically, help people assist or open new ways of thinking about it? Of course, in practice, what we have today are solutions like pilot projects or innovation policy labs. But you will see that in the context of a real experimentation, that doesn't work, or works, halfway, because at the end, once what comes out of that policy lab has to be applied without any changes, and which goes against the logic of experimentation itself. So very often we find that this conceptualization of these issues runs ahead of practice. So my central argument, or our central argument, is these several papers are two. First, that you simply cannot add experimental dimension to the conventional policy cycle. It simply would not work. And this is what usual thinking is today. We just, add it like addition to that and don't change anything about it. Both all these papers are based basically on not on kind of our high sky thinking, but it's based on observing the practice and specific cases. And the first one is actually the result of our exploration and participation in the Smart Specialization in Croatia, where we see that it's exactly because of this trade-off between kind of rhetorical need to experiment and the need to be accountable, then you have in reality something which we describe as 4 disconnected governance regimes. So that's the first argument. And the governance solution to that is the one which we propose, which is common to both of these issues. We call it learning networks, but this is simply a conceptual name. In reality, you can call it almost in whichever way you want, but I'll be more specific at that. As a way to resolve this trade-off. The second argument is that there is a lack of solutions for institutionalized experimentation, which goes beyond the pilots, even if you go for pilots, So there is also trade-off between these approaches today, which are kind of top-down, very popular whole government approach, and bottom-up kind of logic. And here, again, we are not inventing something from the sky. We try to find in European policy practice in the past, what are those network programs which are operating on principles which kind of try to reconcile these two approaches, top-down and bottom-up, which are kind of more applicable or relevant for most of the regions. So you can think about it in terms of the conventional policy cycle, where you think about the policy priorities, program design, program implementation, monitoring, and then how you start with everything again. And each of these areas, each of these blocks has a specific kind of policy governance. And when we did exploration in Croatia, because I was one also very much implemented in that, then we see that there are lots of problems with this kind of idealized model. What we see here, and I'm going very, very quickly to that, there is a paper where you can read much more about that to very specific detail. We see first that there is a poor conversion of thematic priority areas into portfolio policy instruments. Then there is issues of how do you go from program design to program implementation, because your implementation governance is driven by conventional public procedural accountability papers, kind of in a complexly designed implementation system where you have lots of kind of governance problems and issues where things are not working, but they cannot be corrected. And then you have a policy which does not have built-in mechanism, learning and mutual adjustment. We all talk about the smart policy, but actually in reality, policy turns out to be very dumb, so to say. And then because you don't have the system, then your participatory governance actually inhibits this experimentation and the involvement of stakeholders. Of course, this is a reflection of the situation in Croatia in the past. Things are improving. You know, we are all trying to do much better, but this is the reality which comes in that process, which means that if we want to resolve this issue, we have to build in kind of more learning dimension into that process, which means that we have to allow that. But what is the current kind of solution to these issues? If you look at the literature, what academics will tell you, oh, yes, no problem, reflexive governance. Now, what is a reflexive governance? Well, this is the kind of governance where you try to monitor, anticipate, involve actors. Yeah, that's all fine. But again, there is this issue of accountability. You can't simply say people, oh yeah, you learn. Even if the learning in itself has to lead some learning outcomes. What did you learn? Where is that kind of? So we are trying to address this issue. In order to address this issue, then we have to say, okay, there is not only outcome accountability, where is the result? Because very often in experimental policy, there won't be results, but there has to be, therefore, another type of accountability, which is deliberative or process accountability. Have you organized the process in such a way that basically you could say, well, we try to, change things, but it didn't work or work halfway, and this is what we've learned. And this is also a type of accountability. So unless you have these both types of accountability, you cannot talk about the experimental policy, because experimentation rests on learning, but learning in itself has to be justified. And that is the crucial kind of the jump in thinking today, which means that in the whole process, kind of, you have to build something which conceptually we call learning networks, where in each of these stages, you are able to detect mistakes and you are able then to react in that process. Kind of. This is a kind of conceptual solution. I'll show in a minute how that would work in practice. And you will see that in our also second example, this is something which we actually find in practice that network programs are implementing. So here is in the Croatian case, very practically talking for people who are involved in S3, that would be equivalent of learning network would be S3 monitoring evaluation network. But this is not kind of conventional, your monitoring evaluation at the end of the story, but you can call it real-time network, which is positioned in such a way that all stakeholders are involved in that process, and the changes can be done within the real time. And I'll say more about that at the very end of the presentation, because I want to go into the second issue, which is related to that. How do you institutionalize experimentation, which goes beyond the pilot, where you have numerous actors involved, and where you have a couple experimentation with this flexibility with the network governance in the system. Because in reality, people either think from this whole of government top-down approach or ecosystem entirely driven, which has its trade-offs, huge problems in that case. Of course, they are applicable in some cases, we do not deny that, but in reality, kind of experimentation, none of them is kind of a satisfactory solution because of these trade-offs in that process because of the coordination challenges, because all this operates in multi-level EU context, with the issues of horizontal coordination, vertical coordination, intersectoral coordination, timing coordination, and these pure solutions in this case simply have difficulties to be implemented. So what we have in this paper, we look at the 4 programs in the different countries in Sweden, Holland, and the one is the Slovenia. So we try to summarize, and Denmark, and we try to summarize lessons from these programs. And when you look at the reality of these programs, then you come to several features which these network-based programs, relatively successful, share. And you can look at just here at the red parts of the bullet points. First of all, they are network-driven program which have institutionally different facilitators. In each case, this is different facilitator, but he has that function. It is a facilitator create space for communication and interaction among stakeholders. they operate like brokers, and their activities are not confined to R&D, and their task is to match support to individual needs. And they have kind of flexibility in all these stages of designing and implementation of this program. So these are the features which these programs share, and we try to explain it more in the paper. Of course, they're based on evaluation studies, which where we give reference. But what underlines these programs is a mode of work, which is kind of, maybe people are even not aware of that, but they are called learning networks and action learning. This is the underlying mode where you, as a network organizer, you are facilitating interaction among the different stakeholders in that process. So action learning is something which is known from the business community, but we think that actually the nature of the problems which we are facing in public policy is similar in that case, and that we have to actually transfer some of this solution, which is a highly situational practice, but these are not just talking shops, and this is a crucial point with which I want to kind of conclude this presentation. They should be set up as formal inter-stakeholder arrangements, which have explicit operational structure and business model. And this is my, I think, last slide, where I point that these are not networks which simply facilitate learning as a product of the policy process like we have, okay, let's learn what we have. They are basically organizational arrangement where stakeholders can negotiate, act, reflect, and challenge each other accountability criteria. But they are formal governance arrangement in the sense that they include all relevant stakeholders. They are formal arrangement with clear, well-defined who is eligible to participate. Only those of which can actually then influence and shape the change of the implementation or the design. They have operational structure, which includes regular, monthly meetings, and they have a primary target, which is defined, and their learning outcomes have to be defined. This is again mechanism which some of my authors have worked in a practice on a range of other projects within the EU to different programs. So there is already know-how about learning networks as a solutions to these issues, and we think that successful network programs show that they are basically present there, and it's time basically to spread this mode of thinking and approach into the context of smart specialization. So I think I'm exactly in time. Also, I managed, so thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Slaven. You're right. You're exactly on time. So thank you for an interesting presentation, and also to all of you in the audience. Please write down your questions to Slav now, so that we have them ready for the Q&A in the end. So our next speaker is Une Dahl Fitjar, Professor of Innovation Studies at the University of Stavanger. And he's also part of the Police Consortium, which is an EU framework program that aims to improve the EU's smart specialization strategies or policies. His core interests and research areas are regionalism, regional identity, and innovation. So please, Une, the stage is yours.
Thank you. So let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay, I hope you're all seeing this now, and thank you very much for the invitation to talk on the policy and practice of smart specialization, a little bit from the perspective of what we've done in the Polis network, which was, as Dag Håkon said, a doctoral network where we had a lot of PhDs working on different aspects of smart specialization policy from more of a regional studies, economic geography perspective. And also other work that we've done to basically consult Norwegian regions on how to develop smart specialization strategy, which we've done in a few counties, also for chambers of commerce and innovation districts. So I want to start with this kind of overall topic of what smart specialization is. So I mean, you've heard this already from the other speakers, but I want to give you a little more of a kind of regional studies perspective on this. The way I understand smart specialization, it's a regional innovation policy that is aimed at developing new competitive advantage. And obviously, this is kind of competitive advantage that also should be sustainable and inclusive, so pointing towards the future, not just from an economic perspective. And we've heard great examples of this in the previous presentations. But the starting point for smart specialization has been what should regions specialize in order to take a place in the European technology landscape and in developing competitive advantage for the region. And the core idea behind the concept is then that regions need to identify priorities where they should invest in R&D and innovation. So essentially priorities which are areas where they have a unique potential for developing competitive advantage. Because this will maximize the impact of public investment both in the region, so the region can invest in things where it has potential to develop something, but also at the European scale, because we distribute essentially different resources across different parts of Europe, so that all regions don't go after the same priorities, essentially. How we do this, essentially, the idea is that each region develops a strategy for smart specialization, which fulfills 3 criteria in the original S3 formulation. So it should be smart. And here, that is to say that it should identify what are the strengths and competitive advantages of the region. So what is essentially where the region has potential. It should be specialized insofar as it should prioritize. It should prioritize the research and development and innovation investments into domains where the region has the potential to develop competitive advantage. And it should also be strategic. So it should be based on a joint vision in the region for regional innovation. And then how do we do that? Well, first of all, a smart specialization strategy is something that is developed in a broad partnership. So it's not just the government developing a strategy and implementing it, but it is done jointly with the various stakeholders of that strategy. So the government, industry, academic actors, civil society actors, other kinds of stakeholders that are have a stake in the region. And then these take part in a very obscure thing called the entrepreneurial discovery process, where they identify essentially areas where the region can develop competitive advantage. It should be evidence-based, which is what I'll, I guess, mainly focus on. So it should build on analysis of the region. It should build on peer review. It should build on benchmarking with other regions. And then this strategy should kind of be a guidance for investment from authorities, both the regional, national, and European level, as well as for investments from other stakeholders. So by the higher education sector in the region, by industry actors in the region, all should have this kind of joint vision in the strategy as a starting point for how they invest. What are the benefits of this? Well, it's kind of, the core thing is that we move away from this kind of one-size-fits-all policy approach. So regional innovation policy has often been based on kind of pursuing similar ideas. So we have from older times this kind of idea of Silicon Somewheres, where kind of all regions try to develop their own Silicon Valley. And this doesn't really fit to the context of all different regions. So here it should be really kind of tailored to the region. It should be a place-based policy, in short. And if regions kind of don't target the same industries, then you do have kind of more potential for success. And you also kind of avoid duplicating strategies across regions. So that's kind of the idea of the policy. Now, I want to take a little step back and say, okay, well, how do regions develop these competitive advantages? How can we think about which specializations are suitable for a region, or in which areas regions have potential to develop competitive advantage? So I want to start with a kind of basic economic principle, which is the principle of specialization. So specialization is one of the core things in our kind of contemporary economy. One of the main drivers, I would say, of prosperity and of the development that we've had in the global age and in the age of the Industrial Revolution, essentially. So, I mean, this is a very famous picture in economics, which is the pin factory by Adam Smith. So, kind of going back to the foundational literature of economics, we had the idea of specialization, which is in the pin factory, different individuals specializing in different parts of the production process. So some people weld, some people form, some people melt, and they become specialized in that task. So the division of labor enables specialization, and this happens not just at the level of individuals, but also at the level of organizations, at the level of economies as well. So regions tend to specialize in different areas of production in different industries, essentially, or different parts of the work process. Now, the next question is, what is it that we can specialize in? Because not everybody can do all kinds of jobs. Here comes this kind of metaphor by researchers at the Harvard Growth Lab, which is the Scrabble theory called of economic development, where essentially, I mean, if you think about specializations as the words that you can form in Scrabble, then your capabilities are the letters that you have handed out to you. Those letters can be the capital that you have in the region, the technology that you have, your natural resources, although most of the attention has been really kind of on the skills that the region has. So which kind of skills do workers in the region possess? And then there is variation in which capabilities are needed. So just like words need different letters, also different specializations need different types of capabilities. And there are variations in which capabilities regions have. So you have a different set of letters distributed to your region than another region would have. And essentially the task then is to maximize the points, just like in Scrabble. So you want to put together your capabilities in the most unique way, in the most complex way, so that you form a long word where essentially you are the only one that has the ability to write that word. You're the only region that can produce this something, because then you really have a kind of long-term competitive advantage. Others can't really copy that. And then we can move on to a different metaphor from the same area or from the same lab, which is on the monkeys and the trees. And this metaphor says something about how do you change your specialization. So if you've written one word, how can you move to writing a different word? And here the metaphor is that these specializations are like trees in a forest, and the regions are like monkeys in that forest. You change your specialization by jumping from one tree to another. Obviously then it is easier to jump to a tree that is close to you than to jump to one that is all the way across the forest. So the concept of related variety basically talks about how closely are these trees together in the forest. If you are in a dense forest, you have many options. You can jump to many different new specializations, many different trees. Whereas if you are in a sparse populated forest, you need to jump a long way. It's more complex, and you might have fewer options available to you. So the idea of a region essentially in this search for new specialization is to find a new tree that is bountiful, where you can jump easily, and which basically allows you to sustain your competitive advantage. So putting this together, the framework for smart specialization looks like this. So you have essentially two dimensions that says something about what are the different risks and benefits associated with different options that you have, strategic options for how you choose these specializations. One being relatedness, which is essentially how close is the next tree to you. If relatedness is high, then the specialization that you're aiming for is relatively close to what you already do. So you should be able to jump to it fairly easily, or the risk is quite low that you don't manage to diversify into that specialization. On the y-axis is complexity, which is essentially how long is the word that you can write with this. So how unique or how difficult is this specialization essentially to do. And the kind of relatively commonplace policy advice in the field of regional studies is that regions should then specialize in the kind of top right corner of this box. So they should focus on industries which are related to their current specializations and which are complex, because that is kind of how you both avoid a lot of competition and how you also kind of develop your economy further. So we want to kind of see how to what extent are the opportunities associated with low risk and high benefits. So this is what we call the kind of the diversification opportunities matrix, the kind of analysis that we do to help regions understand their different options and understand the potential of that. We've done these analyses for quite a few regions. So this is one example that we did in Stavanger. So this is essentially plotting all the industries in Stavanger into this matrix. Stavanger is it's a region specialized in oil and gas, especially. So you can see the oil and gas industries out to the far right in this figure. The two blue triangles there, they are oil extraction and oil services. Both very complex industries and highly related to the industry structure in Stavanger. And then you can see other regions, other industries in the region, the kind of triangles being industries where the region is already specialized, the circles being industries where it is not. So then the region can kind of explore these options and see, okay, are any of these suitable candidates where we can try to make a project and try to develop something in a field where we're not already specialized. So that is kind of one of the ways in which we can interpret and use analysis to guide some of these processes. And then I want to kind of end with some of the points that also Slavo made. So essentially, how is this kind of transferred into practice? How has smart specialization been implemented? Because I mean, this is the theory. This is kind of the knowledge that has come out of our field to kind of inform these policies. But in practice, obviously, regions, they adopt policies based on a political process and not based on policy advice and on these kind of analysis of what will be best. So smart specialization was implemented in the EU essentially through this process of conditionality, ex-ante conditionality. So basically having a smart specialization strategy was a condition for receiving funding in the cohesion policy programs. This created a lot of relatively superficial adoption of these policies by regions. So not all regions took this really kind of into heart in a meaningful way. It was often a paper exercise in many regions, and many regions especially found problems where they didn't really have a robust evidence base where they could build their specializations on. So they hadn't really done a lot of analysis of what were the industrial landscapes like, or which kind of options did they have. Even the concept of smart specialization has proven, as many people have said, challenging to regions because people didn't really understand what necessarily it meant, especially kind of the concept of specialization pointed towards focusing on what we were already good at, whereas smart specialization, the idea was to diversify into new areas. Also, smart pointed towards maybe digital technologies more than other areas, or it's used in different ways in different contexts. So this proved to basically throw a few regions off the game, and we have kind of on the basis of this looked a little bit at, okay, which were the specializations that regions actually did adopt. So this is from a paper that we published on this relatively, well, a couple of years ago, where we plotted all of the specializations or the priorities of different regions in the EU into this matrix. So essentially showing, okay, compared to the region's own industrial base, how related were these specializations to the region? Also, how complex were they, which is obviously something that doesn't necessarily vary across regions. So you'll see kind of the vertical dots here are basically in a bunch of different lines. But in this map, the blue ones are the strategies that were selected as priorities by the regions. The gray ones are those that were not selected. And you can see that the regions actually, they distributed themselves very broadly across this landscape. So regions were not very much more likely to choose priorities that were related. They quite often chose actually priorities that were not related and that were also not complex. So essentially areas which both were difficult for them to get to and which didn't really give necessarily a lot of benefits. We found also that regions were not really able to prioritize. So the number of priorities selected ranged from 4 in some regions, which is pretty good, to around 40 different priorities out of the 60 potential industries that they could choose from. So they were also spread fairly thin across different areas. So the gap between us, as we said previously as well, between theory and implementation has been pretty big in smart specialization, and I think regions would benefit from kind of considering how to do these analysis and what would be kind of how they can best use these policies. So that's all I had. Thank you.
And thank you as well, Une, for a very interesting presentation. And I hope you also note down some questions for Une and the others as well, because now we are going into the Q&A session. And in Zoom, you do have a raise hand function, so please use that one. And I guess Elisa and Asa will help me also keep track of them. And I see a first hand from Tatiana.
Yeah, thank you, because I have to react to these two presentations from a practitioner point of view. Because, of course, all regions have the choice, can decide if to address a smart specialization strategy as a bureaucratic process in order to get European funds, but they can also use it as an opportunity to experiment, to try new things, but not only experimentation to do pilots, but experimentation to develop alternatives that can be integrated in the business as usual of the public administrations. And I have been public servant for 24 years, and I cannot not accept anymore that bureaucracy and accountability are impediments to experiment, to engage in transformative innovation policies. This is not the case, because in Spain, in Catalonia, we have lots of bureaucracy. You cannot imagine how much bureaucracy we have. European Regional Development Fund has a lot of bureaucracy, additional bureaucracy, and we are engaging practitioners from public administrations in experimentation, in learning processes, everything paid by the European Regional Development Funds, everything integrated in our bureaucracy, providing at the same time, because you need to be clever, you need to provide accountability, indicators, and results, but they are very easy to provide. Even we have changed the indicators of the European Regional Development Fund, and we have innovation camps as an indicator of accountability. So, but this cannot be an excuse, because we are an example that really public administration, maybe they like capacities, they like imagination, they like willingness, many times public servants or politicians, but these are the kind of obstacles that we have now, the lack of systemic views and the kind of lack of commitment. But the problems with bureaucracy can be easily overcome. And I think that we are an example as a region that it's possible to do that. Of course, it's not easy. There are many obstacles, but it's possible, and it's a responsibility to do that. At the same time, in universities, it cannot be an excuse for researchers. The need for to publish in international high-level rankings cannot be an excuse for them not to engage in these transformative innovation policies. So we really need to think out of the box and to generate new options and new possibilities to try different things, because what we are doing is not working and we are going in the contrary direction of what we declare we want to go. So, and it's possible to do that. We have an example. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. Do you have any comments, Slavo or Une?
Well, it's a kind of on one hand, Tatiana is sounds very depressive. On the other hand, she is the hope, because she's actually quite optimistic regarding what they're doing in Catalonia. And actually, we are learning from cases like that, and they are opening new avenues, kind of. And in one of our paper, we also have cases of best practice on which you then want to generalize and spread that around, but you have to convert it then into kind of language which is then relevant to other regions. So I think this is exactly what we are talking about, experimental policy. Nobody's got a recipe from the top, and nobody can come and tell you this is what you should be doing. It's a really process of us discovering through different cases, practices, and new things. And Tatiana pointed to, really, this is an area where there is a need for really a much closer interaction between the practitioners and the, let's call it, academic, semi-academics. Of course, academics have their criteria, which very often do not match the other one. But this is the area where we see that our own criteria, academic criteria of relevance of being engaged in the process, have to be changed also. We cannot kind of just go and write blue sky papers and thinking that we are doing something very important, kind of. But we are part of that process of which is a process which cannot be stopped. It's a transformative innovation policy can sound as a nice phrase, but this is what is in reality something really qualitatively new. And I think that many people are still not aware. At the beginning, always people take it, with a pinch of salt and think in the old way. But we are in a new period, and this is just the beginning. Yeah.
What do you think, Une?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very healthy attitude that from a policymaker to come in with that kind of approach, and I think I found the Barcelona example or the Catalonia example very inspiring in that sense, that it broadens the concept, and it's been able to. I mean, they've been able to use it in a way that's very helpful and addresses regional challenges. And then I think, I think it is a concept or an approach that offers a useful tool for policymakers, but it's also like many transformative innovation policy ideas, it's also a very complex idea. So it is something that I think there will be variation across regions and across policymakers in how well they will be able to use it, and I think that's for us an interesting area of research, but also I think for governments a good opportunity to learn from each other and to kind of share experiences across different regions.
Mm-hmm. I don't see any other hands, but if you also have questions, or all of you in the audience, you can also write them in the chat, and I can ask them. So please do that. But in the meantime, I have a follow-up. Yeah, here is Christoph. Please.
Let me unmute. Okay. Nice to see you guys, and a very interesting presentation. But recently, there is a kind of rumors, let's say, saying that the cohesion policy and structural funds might be highly concentrated at national level. And what do you think about this kind of perspective? So we are discussing smart specialization strategies at the regional dimension. And then you have the centrally managed implementation programs. So what do you think? What is your opinion on that? If it's possible for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. Who would like to?
Yeah, I can answer.
Yeah, Tatiana.
Yeah. Okay. It's been said, but in our case, if at the beginning we started Smart Specialization Strategy as an ex-ante conditionality in order to access, because at the beginning no one understood what this was for. Now our Smart Specialization Strategy goes much beyond the ERDF and the regional development funds. At the end, is an instrument, a kind of new instruments, policies, perspectives, tools, narratives to address the social, environmental, and economic challenges. And at least in developed regions, ERDF is a small amount of, it's important cohesion funds, but it's not that it's conditioning all the policies. What we are doing with our specialization strategy is to develop tools that the government needs in order to address the huge challenges that we have, independently if in the next years we have funds from European Commission for that or not. But of course, from regional government, I have to say that we don't agree with this change of policy, because regions are very near to place-based challenges, and we know all researchers, even the documents of the European Commission, always are saying that place-based challenges need to be addressed from the local and regional level, because the national governments are too far away. So there is some kind of contradiction. We address the challenge related to green and just transition, or we just move again towards competitiveness, a lot of investment in technology to increase the competitiveness of companies. If this is the choice, then it makes sense that all the funds get to national government. If we still think that European funds should be oriented to accelerate green and just transition, it's a huge mistake to take out funds from regions and putting them at national level. This would be my contribution. Thank you.
Slavo?
Well, I mean, this question points to this hard reality that in some countries process can be extremely centralized, but which goes completely against the logic of the smart specialization. But I think it's something which there are ways how one can gradually start to change that. And I can talk now from my very recent experience actually in Croatia through a pilot project, which is for me one way how one can kind of change the nature of the policy making by involving more regions. This is a pilot project where in Croatia you have regional value chains, and there are something like 14 these regional value chains. And the idea was to link what kind of business community can offer in terms of its product services with the societal challenges. And these challenges were defined through a process of a kind of going almost from the very low level of territorial level, and then aggregating this. And the whole pilot was on trying to link what business community can offer with societal challenges. Which are those societal challenges where business community can offer? So this is a kind of process of co-designing of policy, which doesn't go top down, but is actually with the participation, of course, and moderation of the ministry. But the idea is that at the level of the region, you try to make the business community to respond to local societal challenges. So this is a way of different way of designing policy, which goes exactly opposite of the assumption which colleague has made. So I think it is possible, it is necessary to open such processes and then changing gradually the nature of the policy making. Otherwise, S3 becomes just another label where you have a conventional policy where there is no qualitative change, which in itself is kind of worrying, because then you have all these problems of state failures in managing that, and new mistakes and so on. So yeah, so I think we simply have to then open such cases, such possibilities, and new ways how to co-design policies to counteract this excessive centralization in some countries. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any comments as well, Eivind?
Yeah, I mean, I think of course there were many different ways in which this was solved in different countries also in the previous round. So I mean, some regions have already developed smart specialization strategies at the national level, or in some countries they've done that, right? So so it's not that there's one approach to this, but I will say that, you know, I do agree with the previous speakers that the region is the suitable level for smart specialization in terms of the logic of the idea, and this kind of just to add to the points that were made. I mean, this also goes to this idea of specialization. So different economies specialize, and by that I do mean regional economies specialized, because regions are much more specialized than our countries, because they are labor markets that typically kind of focus on certain things. So and there is a lot of heterogeneity across regions within countries, both in terms of their competences and skills, and in terms of their current specializations, in terms of the potential that they have. So so I think doing this at national level in many countries would undermine the whole idea of selecting priorities that fit with the needs and potential of the territory. So so I would hope that regions retain a strong place in this.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, my bit, please.
Thank you all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you all for nice presentations and very interesting team. I just wanted to ask you, Rune, actually, in fact, because you said, Rune, there are some good stories from regions that are come already very long with this thinking and this policy making. Do you have any examples for best practices regions to look in, because we want to learn all more and dive into it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the example that was given here from Catalonia is certainly one that is very interesting and very good to look into more. So I guess that was chosen also for a reason here. I think, I mean, there are good examples, but yeah, not sure which ones I should pull out kind of immediately, but certainly kind of from a Norwegian perspective, we're kind of relatively early stage in this compared to the rest of Europe. So so I think there are a lot of interesting places to look at in that.
The Joint Research Center has published a lot of good examples and good best practices for transformative innovation policies for smart specialization. Maybe the best thing is to take a look at the publications from Joint Research Center and all the project that Slavos said about the place transformative innovation policy. So there are lots of cases of good practices from different regions.
Do you have any examples, Slavo?
Well, now I was just not thinking about examples. I was thinking that we may give kind of a wrong picture based on the at least on this presentation where we had these priorities, and that is the core of it. We have to understand that the S3 itself has this transformation, because now we are in the stage where we are thinking about the S3 for sustainability. Yeah, if you think about that, then the whole issue of priorities cannot be confined. Oh, we've got new fantastic competitiveness potential areas, you know, kind of, because if you think about the sustainability, then competitiveness is relevant, of course, but it's not the only one. It's a social relevance, environmental relevance, greening, how that contributes to transformation. In that context, why we call it transformative, because it cannot be confined on innovation policy only. These are not issues of a kind of, oh, we've got a new magic thing which will kind of have a breakthrough on the market, but we think in terms of transformation in terms of greening, in terms of climate change and sustainability. You think about the whole issue of smart specialization from a different angle, where innovation policy is never the only answer. It can be only part of it. You have to think about the kind of policy mix, because when you go into one area and then you talk to stakeholders and you see how many issues are obstacles, and this kind of the R&D dimension, innovation dimension is one of 10 things. And the whole idea is that you have to broaden it, that you have to bring other stakeholders into the process. And that becomes complicated, because then, ministries have to talk to each other, agencies have to talk, sectors have to talk to each other, kind of. So this is for me kind of the real complexity. And then when you tell me what is the example, well, then example would be really example of transformative policy, and where you have the whole transformation in all these dimensions, rather than, kind of, we've got one specialization and we have a magic things on the innovation side. This is, of course, relevant, but we are in a new stage where we kind of are now going beyond that, in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, any other questions following that? No, if not, just raise your hand. I have actually a question. You talked about learning and the importance of learning, Slavo, and so wondering a little bit with different examples, to which degree and on which areas do you think we can actually learn from examples in other regions? What is the transferability of the knowledge from different examples?
I think this process, in this case, the main there are no kind of ready-made solutions. I said it now third time, kind of. So the main thing is to learn why some processes in some regions are more successful than the others. Why in one region they manage to have a stakeholders which then share the same kind of let's call it mindset or objective, and they're able to overcome their internal kind of short-termism, and they're able to think in a more strategic way. Because when you talk to a business community, they're all kind of, I call it the economizing, the short-term. But then in S3, when you bring them in, then you offer them opportunity to think in a long term, not only what will be tomorrow, but what will be the day after tomorrow. And then they will see actually that they have to think also strategically. And of course, in the less developed region, people have more difficulties to think more strategically. But this is an opportunity to bring them into that kind of shared common agenda. And for me, the main learning is how in some regions, why they manage to have these groupings to generate shared agenda. Once you put them together, once you close them in a room and for a few days, they will share so much in common. You will basically transform the whole area in a way. So that is for me the main learning, how to do it, rather than kind of some magic methodological thing, kind of. So this is where we have too little discussion about it, Tatiana will obviously have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, Tatiana.
Yeah, because we are in Catalonia, but Catalonia is a big region, and we have many different kinds of areas, and we are really, our learning process is focused on exactly this, because governments, policymakers need to understand how to engage the stakeholders that are necessary to address these challenges. And this can only be done place-based. And for us, because we have been learning and experimenting a lot during many years, the key is when you bring the different stakeholders to a table or to a place, there is need to be a purpose. They need to understand that what you are doing there is going to address the problems that they have. For example, in the case of Lleida, there were these people having this urgent problem with the manure of their pigs and cows. So you invite them not to talk about the future, but about how this problem can be reoriented into an opportunity, and to work with them so they make this mindset shift in order that they start understanding then maybe there are other possibilities and they are not condemned or damned to do always and to be at the populated area. And in our case, we have seen that it's precisely with less developed regions when these processes have more impact. But it's at the same time very important to bring people from public administration, policymakers with competences in addressing these challenges to this same territory, to listen to these people and to their problems. Because what we are seeing is that now that they understand better, they are rethinking some kind of their policy instruments, but not because we say they need to do that. It's how, and it's tricky, and we have successes and failures, and it's a learning process. But the key is that they really bring, these actors are bring together to do something that is in interest for all of them. And this requires to have a shared vision of the future, and you cannot work from consensus. You work for transformation. You need to bring in the table only the people that want to work together for a desired vision of the future, because there are many contradictions that need to in transformation, and not everybody agrees with transformation. And this is how to manage conflict is also key in this kind of process, because people avoid conflict, and then you have many meetings, and the important issues are not handled in these meetings because there are conflicts there, and then you don't come forward. So these kinds of things, we need more tools, and we need more researchers engaged in this kind of processes to really codify all these learnings. Thank you.
Thank you. But how do you think we can then know if someone that could potentially be involved is in there for transformation, or to be more conservative, or how do you know beforehand, or you just have to experiment, as we have talked about today?
Well, my answer to that would be that we have to develop institutional capability for transformative policies. And to do that, you have to try to formalize this process of bringing stakeholders together and try to form something which I kind of theoretically would call, these are coalitions for technology upgrading, kind of, where you then people discover what are the obstacles and what are the opportunities, which they themselves do not know. You would be shocked to know that, many of the problems are not related to the Ministry of Science and Technology, to Ministry of Education, but to a variety of other ministries, because there are regulatory issues, there are issues which at the first glance do not have anything to do with one specific area, and develop that capacity is not something which is exists there. Of course, in the more developed countries, when I compare it to Scandinavia, where you're from, and when I compare it with South, there's a huge difference, because you already have these networks where stakeholders can meet and can negotiate and moderations. But in many other regions, this is a blank areas. You would have to start from scratch and start that process. But we still don't have even awareness of what is that institutional capacity. We are focused on one kind of, one individual agency. Yeah, they now got to the administrative capacity. They can manage and they can disperse all the money, and we think this is that. No, it is for transformation policy, you need these inter-organizational communications channels where different interests can be reconciled, and you don't know in advance who can be that, can do. But you have to start the process, and then out of 5, there will be 2 who will be very successful, and others who will learn based on them. So that is the how I see in practice how it goes.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting area that we're going into here, because this is one of my frustrations with smart specialization, is that it is kind of this apolitical approach in a way that is kind of devoid of politics, and therefore it doesn't really have any of these areas of kind of resolving conflict between different interests and different stakeholder groups. So the idea is that you should come together as stakeholders, and then you should jointly identify where you want to go. You want to define a joint vision, and you have this kind of consensus-based approach, and you have this emphasis on learning, where you kind of learn what will be the best way to go, which is a very technocratic way of thinking about policy making. So I think there is a need to kind of open this approach and say, okay, you know, actually these policies are also subject to kind of democratic constraints, right? So it's not just that you kind of objectively define a vision and bring together stakeholders in a way that just kind of bypasses the democratic way of decision making. So I do think there is a need to recognize that also in defining these missions and in transforming regions, there are different interests and different opinions, and we need to have ways of reconciling this if we want to have a kind of sustainable politically policy to move forward with.
Yeah, thank you. And Tatiana?
I need to answer to that because, bureaucracy, accountability, and legitimacy, always the same impediments. So share agendas, as I said, it's not just a group of friends deciding the future of the region. Share agendas is an accelerator of interrelations between landscape, regime actors, and niche actors. We need spaces in which regime actors, and these are, of course, people from government, work together with these alternatives and understand the problems, the place-based problems. Smart Specialization Strategy is approved at political level. So the directionality, the goals are established at political level. The instruments are established at political level. But there is a lot of freedom and spaces in which really these big social and environmental challenges is not the responsibility of the politicians to address them. It's the responsibility of all people, researchers, normal workers. So it's not that in the administration we have lots of persons, in normal persons. You have public administration, you have all these problems. No, I'm Tatiana, I have also a research background, I'm committed to many things, and it's the same in all the different institutions. We need to break down this kind of silos that really are impeding us to look for, to try to test new possible ways of collaborating together in order to address these challenges. And it's possible because we are doing that in many different processes. It's possible. And on the contrary, what we have seen in Lleida, because this is spectacular, this case, because now we have the 10 relevant institutions in the territory, the municipality, the province government, I don't know how many municipalities, the Chamber of Commerce, the trade unions, all are in the agenda, because for them it's very difficult to start these processes. But when these processes start and are relevant for the territory, they join in and start a different kind of relation with the problem and with the stakeholders, because the system of governance is different. And this is precisely legitimation by votes only, or legitimation because the politicians are engaged with the people in the problems that the people every day have in the territory. So we need to change the narratives and the way we see our barriers, because if not, then we get the press at home, and I'm public administration and can do nothing. I need to give accountability, bureaucracy, I have to fulfill all the indicators, and I work from 83. No, there are many people also in the public administration that work with very different schemes, and it's possible to work with that, fulfilling all the requirements, and I have my politicians that tell me what to do, of course, and the government change, but when there are these kind of initiatives, they persist even if the government changes. So we have these traps that we are always repeating them and repeating them. So we need to move forward, please. And we need researchers to come with us, because we are discussing that many times, that in smart specialization strategies, many times practice in some places is ahead from research. We need to find these bridges, and we are working in many forums trying to build these bridges and to develop new narratives, because if not, we don't come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Slavo?
I cannot resist to not to react to what Rune has rightly commented, that this is seen as a highly, technical, technocratic process, depoliticized. I'll take one example from Romania. This is even one of the chapter in the book which I edited some time ago about smart specialization. Of course, you will not see it clearly because it's not in a blunt language. But if I put it in a blunt language, this was a highly kind of successful technical in terms of sophistication exercise of deciding on priorities in Romania. They did a very ambitious and very sophisticated Delphi process through several iterations, several thousand people involved from all areas of life. And you would say, fantastic, this is exactly how it should be. This is all stakeholders are involved there. And they come up with this final list of priorities. What happened then? Could you guess? Minister put it in a drawer and that's it. Why? Because they were not part of the process. You completely ignore the power politics. You completely ignore that stakeholders are of different levels and on different powers in the process. So therefore, this idea that you can depoliticize is a naive idea in a sense. But on the other hand, you also cannot accept the pure politics around. Otherwise, then you have a hierarchy and that's it. Our idea with these learning networks is a governance mechanism where you try to bring stakeholders which have different powers, but you try to bring them in a structured process where even where different power positions will not be simply reflected, but there will be some kind of bargaining among them. Is one way how you go about it, where you bring stakeholders who are relevant, you recognize, but then you also, they have a responsibility in that process. And this is the way how we can, the only way we can go around. Otherwise, we'll end up in this really schizophrenic situation, like in Romania, we have a highly technical, sophisticated, but nothing happens in reality.
Tatjana is supporting that. So I still have half a page of questions on my sheet here, but and maybe you as well. But we're approaching the end time of the webinar. So I would like to spend the last minute also to thank our three speakers for very interesting presentations and engaging discussions in this webinar. Please also let me know if you have questions afterwards, and perhaps we need to set up a new session on this topic later on. But thank you also to every one of you in the audience asking questions and participating here, and also stay tuned for the next Era Fabric webinar that will be later this year. So hope you all have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
I'll see you.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you.